Hello, this is Will Schlecht from Iron Crow AI, and today I'm going to be doing a demo on how to use the draft tab of the Large Language Model Sandbox to draft patent application sections. So to start with, you need to select which type of document you're going to be generating. In this case, we're going to be generating a patent application. So we need to click this button. The content is going to be the substantive information, invention disclosures or claims if you've drafted them, anything that's actually content or information that could be used to draft a section of whatever document you're going to be drafting. So in this case, a patent application. So we'll upload some example disclosure information. We can take many different kinds of files from PowerPoint to disclosure call recordings, PDFs, etc., and intelligently process them. And that's a part of why it's important that you select which type of document you're going to be generating, because depending on what type of document you're generating, those documents you upload are going to be processed differently, and that's going to improve the quality of the output a lot for that specific document type. So we're uploading, extracting the text from all those documents. And one thing about the overall philosophy of the draft tab in comparison to some other drafting tools that are on the market is we have more of a customizable and section-based drafting approach. So we're going to draft each section of the patent application individually. And what that does is it trades maybe a little bit of convenience for the ability to really control what each of those sections looks like, which I really think if you're an ethical patent attorney, you should probably try to influence the content of each section that you draft. I don't think it really makes sense to just upload a bunch of documents and have a complete specification output. I think there can be too much room for cascading errors. And when you're able to actually control each section that you output, the end result is going to be something that you actually created, even though you can create it maybe 2 or 3 times faster than you'd be able to do just by hand. It's still going to reflect your strategic decision making, your drafting philosophy. Whereas I think a lot of other tools, it's kind of like a car versus a train. You know, if you get on a train, you only have a few stations you can get to, a few destinations. You don't really have control, fine-grained control over where you're going to end up, what the eventual work product that you're going to produce is. And so I think that's one distinction with our tool is it's like a car. You can decide where you're going to go. You can pick the destination. That trade-off is it requires more operator skill, but in exchange for a little bit of upfront learning, you end up being able to produce a much better work product. The next part before we can draft a section is to upload a style document or multiple documents. And this is going to be examples of whatever type of document we're drafting, in this case, a patent application. What do we want that to look like? Maybe what's a couple examples of patent applications we've drafted before that we really like the style of. So in this case, I'll have a few examples. We'll upload 4. I find that anywhere between 1 to 4 documents for the style works pretty well. And I think this is also a unique feature of our drafting design, which is any style. So your own drafting style as embodied by a few examples, but also your style might be different from client to client. So you can give specific examples for the types of documents you draft for, client A versus client B, and the output is going to more closely mimic that. So it does take a little bit of time to upload all these files. And so you can save this progress just by saving this, which is going to save all of the uploaded documents and any of the conversation history that you have. So we'll just call this drafting example, save it. So now we'll be able to come back to this whenever we want. But now we can start drafting any section of the patent application we want to draft. So just as a quick example, please draft a background section for the disclosed invention. This is a very vague description, right? You could have a lot more information about what you want a background to actually capture. But I think I just want a simple example here to show you that even with just a really vague hint about what section should be drafted, this tool does a phenomenal job. But because it's a chat interface as well, you're able to iterate. So if you don't like something about the output, you can then correct that during the next iteration. So it's going to think and then draft. So now we've got the section, background section, formatted as paragraphs. This really does look like the style of background that I tend to draft as embodied by these drafting style examples. But if we don't like anything about it, for example, maybe we think it's a little bit too short, could you please make this background section about twice as long? So we can just iteratively steer this section towards our kind of optimal desired form and content using kind of back and forth chat interactions, which I think are, very powerful, very intuitive way to do things. It's kind of what you would do if you were working with another associate. You might give them an application to draft, you would review it, you might have some edits that you would want, incorporated, but you can do this process kind of in real time. It's going to take a little bit longer to draft because we are asking it to double the size. So we can see looks about twice as long, maybe not exactly twice, but so we've got this section. Let's say that we like it. We can double click. We're going to copy that. So double clicking in a text box automatically copies that text. We can then just paste it here into our working document. And there we go. We've got our first section of our patent application. So let's do an example of how to draft a figure, like a detailed description of a figure, since that tends to be the bulk of what drafting a specification actually entails. So we can clear this text. We could keep it. So we could just keep this chat history and then ask it to draft, another section. Logically, it would make sense to ask it to draft the summary section next, or maybe the brief description of the drawings, but we're going to kind of skip to a figure description. So there's lots of ways that you could draft a figure description. And I think the flexibility that this tool gives you is also the downside, right? Having a lot of choices can sometimes be difficult. But I'll show you one way that I think works particularly well for a workflow to draft a figure description. So we have this tab here called Get Text, which is able to extract text from different types of files. We can go over to a picture that I've taken, a PNG of a figure that I would like it to draft a description for. You could also upload a VSDX file and it would extract the text from that file, or PowerPoint files, or really any type of file. But I think figure, by giving an image, it's actually able to extract the spatial relationships between the components in the figure. So you can see we OCR the text. We have the different text that you can see in the image, but then we also do an image description. So it's able to detail what each of the components are and their spatial relationships to each other. So that's great. And we could probably just copy this and put it into the draft tab and say, please draft a detailed description of this figure, which has been described. So we could do that. Please draft a figure description or a detailed description of the above described figure. All right, everything's looking good. And you can always control which types of content are relevant for a particular prompt. In this case, and in most cases, it's fine to leave everything checked. But for example, if you knew that there is, some really detailed disclosure that it relates only to one figure, you could just select that as the content. That way, like at every level, we try to give you as much control over this process as possible so that the ultimate outcome is something that looks as good or better than you would draft by hand, but that you can draft, in a matter of minutes. So we'll give it this kind of extracted image description and ask it to draft a a detailed description from that. But you could also make your own kind of custom prompts within the Sandbox tab, which could convert the text that you extract from a figure and convert that into an outline. So I think a good way to draft, even as a human, is before you draft a section, make an outline for what you want that section to contain. This figure description actually looks really good, which I'm kind of surprised by because I don't usually feed the direct text extracted into this draft prompt, but that looks really good. But I'll show you another way. As I was referring to, you can kind of automatically prepare outlines as well. So one thing we can do is take this text that we've extracted from our figure, and in our prompt library, we've got this convert figure text to a draft prompt. We can insert the figure text where it tells us to. And, I made this for myself, but you can make your own that kind of follows your own style for what you like your outlines to look like. But basically, I'm going to ask it to convert this figure text into a draft prompt, so into an outline for drafting a detailed description of that figure. So there we go. I will copy this and then bring it over into the draft tab. And we can clear this. So you can see that this is kind of the way that I like to outline figures. I can share these prompts with anyone who wants them, but I think it's also possible for you to make your own, and they're going to be even more helpful and specific for the types of inventions you work for if you've built them with your own examples of basically input figure text and then the output of what you want the outline to look like. But you can see this outline. We want it to, we're telling the tool that it is an outline of figure 2. We want it to use it as a template to draft a description of a dual channel ECG processing system 200. So it, obtain that information from the figure text. And then for each component of the system, draft 1 or 2 paragraphs of description, include 2 or 3 embodiments, et cetera, et cetera. Avoid using technical details from the writing style examples, and always follow any component with its associated reference number, just to ensure that this is drafted this way. You don't need to do these things, but this is just the default template that I like to use to draft my figures. And then we can see we've got a breakdown, kind of hierarchical. So each indentation shows sort of that this first channel consists of all these things. Second channel consists of these other components. And so it's actually able to show the sort of hierarchy of how these components are arranged because it had the spatial information from the figure, from the image that we actually extracted the text from. A key, like a really important part of this prompt as well, is that you can specify how long you want the description to be. Again, a lot of tools, they will just draft some kind of skeleton structure of a figure description, or if they can even draft a figure description at all. But in this case, you can really control if you want it to be, I think 800 words is going to be pretty sparse. So it's going to be more of an outline or a kind of expanded outline or skeleton of this draft. But we could tell it to draft, 1,600 words, and it's going to produce a pretty robust description of this figure. Of course, we need to go over every line, read it, and edit it, make sure that it actually conforms to what we want the output to be. But, you're really able to control if you want to just make a really high level outline, with the kind of introductory paragraphs and each component kind of organized hierarchically within your draft, or if you want it to actually detail, give detailed information about all of the embodiments. So it's going to take a little bit to draft because we told it to draft a pretty substantially long section here. And there we go. So it's come back with pretty nice looking figure description so we can see referring to figure 2, a block diagram of a dual channel ECG processing system 200 is shown. So it kind of gives you a high level of what each of the components are that it contains. So that looks pretty good. It's really quite lengthy. I mean, so we can copy this, bring it over to our working document, which is kind of our working draft. You can use the working document as your working draft, or you can also just export all this into a Word document. So that looks pretty good. Let's now copy all of this and move it over into a Word document. Yeah, and so you can see we've drafted a little over 2,000 words of description. So yeah, I think we can actually look at how close it was able to match our requested word count for the description of figure 2. So let's highlight all of that description and then go to review, word count. Yeah, so we are at 1649 for the word count. So just very slightly higher than what we requested. So it really is able to follow requested word length very accurately. So that's a very high level example of how to use the drafting tab to draft different sections of a patent application. And thank you, and see you next time.